Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of the Roaring Agents podcast. Today I'm here with Stacey Brown Randall. She's award-winning author of Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. Now, referrals are the holy grail of any business, but really that's what we're all trying to do in real estate. So I'm so happy to have you on today, Stacey.
I am thrilled to be here. I know this is going to be a great conversation, Mike.
Awesome. So let's start with, what do we get wrong about, I was going to say asking referrals, but I think that's the first part. But so what do we get wrong about referrals?
Here's the thing that I think is the most important piece for people to understand. When referrals are being given to you, there's actually there's science behind it. And I think not paying attention to the science as to why referrals happen, why they happen consistently, why they don't happen consistently, like everything about referrals is actually based on like science and things that are actually happening based on that science in and during that process. And so without understanding the science, which I don't believe anyone's really taken the time to truly dive into over the last number of decades, well, then the big thing from there is if you don't understand the science, then the tactics, right, are all wrong, because the tactics are based on you. They're based on how do you get referrals. And the idea there is, well, then you can just ask for them, or you can compensate for them, or you can network to know a ton of people and always be seen. And that's how you're remembered. And so, or you can be gimmicky, right? By like, hey, never forget, I'm never too busy for your referrals, like that kind of thing. So those have been the tactics that we've been taught. And it's not just in the real estate industry, like it's across industries. And so the tactics are based on incorrect information of how to generate referrals consistently. And so I think that's the big thing that people get wrong, is that you're fed these tactics that are just based on, hey, you want referrals? Go make it happen. Here's what you do. You just ask people all the time for them, or you just mail out 1,000 postcards that have the sticker on the back that say, I'm never too busy for your referrals, and think that that's going to generate a steady stream of referrals into your business. And the reality of it is those tactics aren't based on the science. And that's why if they work for a very short amount of time. Usually it's good for like maybe one referral from someone, but that's not consistent. And if you don't have consistent referrals, then it's harder to grow your business in an easier way.
I've never really liked the at the end of your signature, I'm never too busy for your referrals, or the best compliment you can give is a referral. It always felt, I think the word you use is inauthentic.
Yeah.
But we're also told you need to always be asking. You need to be, the average person who does not run a business does not understand referrals, and they don't even think in terms of, I've just had that with like someone who worked at an insurance company, like in a big office, they're not thinking about referrals. So what is the science of letting go of that? Because that's kind of, we're clutching onto that. Gotta ask. So what's the science that can get me to let go of that and let them come?
Yeah. So I think the thing that people have to realize is you're right. People aren't thinking about referring you all day long, or at even a moment in any given day. And that's been seen as something's wrong. There's actually nothing wrong with people not thinking about referring you. That's not really their job. But the tactics is very much like, let me beat you over the head so that you remember, except that's not actually what gets someone to remember to refer you either. And if your tactic is to always be asking, guess what else? That becomes your trigger. And if always asking is your trigger, that means you always have to do it. When you pay attention to the science behind why referrals happen, the first thing you have to recognize is, I don't care how many people love you and how many people think you're amazing, not everybody's going to refer you. There's this idea that everybody knows somebody who's going to buy or sell a house, so everybody should be able to refer me. Except that there's like a gazillion real estate agents, not only in your market, but all across the world, right? So the reality of it is that's like, it's like a formula that's broken. And it's a formula we've been fed for years and years and years, but no one's paying attention to the fact that it's actually broken. The truth is, you're right. There are people who don't think about referring you. Nobody thinks about referring you every day or even every week or even every month. And then there are also some people who just really, truly aren't built to refer. So unless you have strategies that meet them where they are versus what's easy for you, or what you feel like may work, but is actually doing damage to your relationship with that person, if you're not willing to meet them where they are, and pay attention to how you cultivate someone who's not referring you into a referral source, or someone who has referred you to keep giving you more referrals. Your tactics, your strategy, your processes, your language has to meet them where they are. And that's the big issue that I see with a lot of the tactics that are out there. It's like, it's what's easy for me. Well, what's easy for me is slapping an email signature, right? Like you said, and just being like, okay, that they told me that would work, except it doesn't, right? And it's not working. And so the reality is, as we look at the science behind it, here's a couple of the things you have to understand. Number one, referrals aren't about you. Let me say that again. Referrals are never about you. I don't care how amazing you are. I don't care how many closings you have in a year. I don't care how many testimonials or online reviews you've received, right? Referrals are never about you. Now, here's the thing. Does somebody have to want to refer to you for you to generate referrals? Yes, but actually the science shows that when a referral source, and that's what we call the people who refer you, there's different words for them, but when a referral source is making the decision to say your name in a moment to somebody else, right, who has a problem, as like AKA needs a real estate agent, right? When they're thinking about saying your name in that moment, they're not actually thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves and the person they're trying to help. So when a referral happens, it's your referral source getting to play hero. Hey, wait, you've got a problem? I know how to help. You know, they say the most powerful word in all of the English language is actually, it is a 4-letter word, but it's a good 4-letter word, not a bad 4-letter word, and it's help. When we hear help, right, we're created to be like, oh, let me see if I can help. Now, not everybody, because let's be honest, some people are just dead inside. But for the rest of us that aren't, right, at the end of the day, we're like, oh, you've got a problem. Let me see if I can help you. In that moment, when that referral source is talking to their neighbor, their colleague, right, the person who works down the hall, right, their friend from a networking group, when they're like, oh, wait, let me help you, that's actually what's triggered first. It's them being the hero and them helping someone else. Then it comes around to you being the real estate agent they choose to refer. And so people flip that. Like in their heads, they think, right, well, Mike got up this morning and he thought to himself, how can I help Stacey grow her business? No, you did not, right? We get up every morning and we think, let's be honest, we think about ourselves. We do think about other people throughout the day, but we're not constantly thinking about them. There's got to be the moment of opportunity, right? Oh, you need something. I know how to help you. Now, how am I going to help you is by connecting you to this solution provider, which is what we are when we receive a referral, because I trust them. And that leads us into the second piece of the science. So number one, it's not about you. It's about your referral source trying to help somebody else. And that triggers the happiness trifecta, which is the chemicals that are released in your brain when we do something good, that are the feel-good chemicals. But then of course, your referral source has to trust you. And so the psychology of trust and the depth of your relationships and your social networks, that science then comes into play as to why you're the agent they choose versus the million other ones they could choose from. I mean, I've heard a statistic one time that the average person knows 12 different real estate agents. Yes. 12. That's
probably
dozen.
20 now.
Right. Totally. Right. But the truth is, if you ask me like, hey, Stacey, if you lived in my area and you're like, hey, Stacey, I need to sell my house. There are 2. Like I know a bunch, right? I'm not even thinking about the agents that I work with that I know like all around the world, but I'm just thinking about like, there are like 1 or 2 that I'm like, here's who I would talk to. But I know hundreds. And so the reality of it is that trust, right? That psychology of trust comes into play. And then the third piece that people overlook is actually the behavioral economics of it all. And that isn't so much when a referral is being given, but what we do, and it's how we build our strategies and our processes and our language and everything that we teach with the tactics. You have to use behavioral economics for them to actually be, for you to actually be able to have a process and a system that actually triggers referrals, what we call the right way. Right. So when you talk about behavioral economics, people automatically think, oh, reciprocity, and we got to take advantage of it. We got to say, oh, you're happy with me? Let me pounce and say, hey, how many people do you know who are just like you that should be working with me? Nobody wants you asking them that. Nobody. Right. Maybe one person who really, really, really loves you is okay with it. The rest of us are like, oh, you just gave me work to do. And that's not what I'm interested in. Right. So we look at behavioral economics from the positive side of it. Right. And so we actually don't even pay attention that much to reciprocity, but we pay attention to the other pieces of behavioral economics, you know, variety, surprise and delight, right? Those wow factor pieces that go into it. And based on that, based on knowing that referrals aren't about me, knowing that the trust factor is super important and the depth of our relationship is important, and understanding behavioral economics in a way to use that for good to nurture an authentic relationship. Our strategies are built around that, because we always tell folks you should never compromise who you are or your relationships to be able to generate referrals. And so the strategies are built around that, but they're built based on that three-pronged approach to science. And that really coming down to, understanding the happiness trifecta, the psychology of trust with depths of relationships, and behavioral economics.
Wow. That was a mini masterclass. I love that. What you said, something that I don't feel I hear anyone else talking about, which is approaching people at where they're at and understanding we're all different. And this is the thing that I do with my coaching in general, is that there's no cookie cutter. There's not this thing and everyone goes through it. It's different because every agent is different. So looking at the referrals and seeing that they're all different, the referral sources, they're all different. And they have, what I tell people is they have different thresholds where they're going to refer you. You have that one person who's like the ambassador. They meet you in 2 seconds and you're the best real estate agent they've ever met. But then you've got these other people who it takes a lot for them to refer anyone because they don't want that on their shoulders if it goes sideways. If you have a bunch of those people in your circle, they're not as likely to refer because that threshold's so high. And so it's understanding, I like that idea of just realizing who your people are and how you approach them. Do you have a category or a way to kind of look at the different people to say, well, this is how I should approach them?
Yeah, so here's the fascinating thing about how we take science and put it into place for the strategies. The number one thing a referral source is looking for when they refer you, and it's what people overlook, or they do it in so quickly in such passing that has zero impact, is to be acknowledged and thanked. I mean, that truly is at the end of the day. And then the second thing they're looking for is to kind of be kept apprised of how it's going. Right. Yes. So, in our world, we call that the immediate thank you and the closing the loop. Those are the things that we want to do when we've received a referral. Right. And so to answer your questions from that perspective of meeting people where they are, that's in the immediacy, right? They just referred you. You better sit. And we say, we're talking about handwritten thank you cards. That's our immediate thank you card. So we're talking about handwritten thank you cards. You may email them a thank you. You may text them a quick thank you, of course, but that is not enough because those are lost in the noise of their technology and they're received, noticed, and forgotten. But a handwritten thank you note tells them that they actually mean something to you because you took the time to write it. And then, of course, and it's funny how, like, we know, I say closing the loop and you're like, yeah, of course you got to do that. But if it's not a process within your business, you will get busy and you will forget to do it. We actually have a training that's specific for our clients. It's called closing the loop. And like what you do to make that an automatic process as much as you can within your business. And so those are the things the referral source is looking when there's a live referral, so to speak, right? When they've recently referred you. But what people don't pay attention to is the need for that relationship to be strengthened and to be developed. Here's where people go wrong with this. They think, oh, well, I have 20 referral sources. That means I've got to do 20 different things multiple times a year to be able to get those folks to generate referrals for me. So I'm meeting them where they're at. The reality is what we teach is a framework of how you build what your outreach will be to your group of referral sources, knowing who they are, looking for commonalities, paying attention to things going on. But then we build out a touch point. We call it touch points. You can think of it as outreach. But for my clients, we call it the touch point plan. And this is only for existing referral sources because you have to use different strategies for people who've never referred you because they don't work the same way. So we build out a touch point plan that's going to be 5, 6, or 7 outreaches or touch points in a year. But we're doing the same thing for all people on our list. So I'm doing 5 touch points to the same 20 people or whatever the number is on a yearly basis. But because we have a framework based on science and really and understanding that kind of like that behavioral understanding, we have a framework where we can actually build out what, when they receive it, will feel like it's all about them. And it has to fit your personality and who you are as a person. And that's what makes it work. So that means to your point, there's never one size fits all. I mean, I have a lot of agents that I work with and I see their touch point plans come across. And there's a couple of things I tell people you must do. There's a few touch points that we say, these are ones, we've been doing this for 10 years. We know what we're talking about. These are ones you've got to do this first because it sets the stage without them knowing it for what's coming. You've got to do this at the end of every year. Like there's certain things we tell them that'll be a part of their touch point plan. Then everything else is specific to them. That is what their referral sources need. So when we build out that plan, like, yeah, it's 6, 7 things that you're doing for everybody in the same way, but allows you to connect with them because what we do and how we build it out, and that is a lot of our secret sauce along with the language that we use when we're doing those touch points. When I receive it, it feels personalized to me, even though 20 other people just got the same thing. There's the wow factor, there's a surprise and delight factor, right? There's the variety factor. There's all those things that kind of come into play with what we do. And so we have like a 4-part framework when we look at the science of how to build out what your touch point should be. And we always tell folks, we start with what we call the platinum principles, which are number 1, it better be all about them. And if it's all about them, let me just go ahead and tell you what they don't need is another koozie or a Yeti with your logo on it, because your logo on something is all about you. It's not about them, right? So we have rules of what your touch points can and cannot be if you want them to have impact. But that first platinum principle is it's got to be all about them. But the second platinum principle is it has to be authentic to you. And so the easiest example I can give is, we've had a number of recovering alcoholics come through our program. And so the debate of alcohol as a touch point always comes up at some point every year, no matter who I'm working with. And so the question is like, that would be really inauthentic for a recovering alcoholic to then use alcohol as a touch point. And you don't need alcohol as a touch point, in case anyone needs to hear me say that direct. But some people ask about it, but it's got to be authentic to you. And that's important, right? And so it's looking at the variety of all the things you can do. And so, I mean, I think one of the things that we do for our clients, particularly those that are in my coaching program, we have this document. It's like 50 plus different touch point ideas that we have seen clients do over the last 10 years that get you really good runway and traction. And they are from simple to more complex. And so they're a range of what you can select to do. But I think what people miss is you can't decide what you're going to do. What are your touch points going to be, alcohol or not, right? I'm kidding with that, but like, what are your touch points going to be until you know who your people are? And I find that people are always like, I got to jump to the what well before I know who the who is. And so people will ask me, they're like, well, can you give me some ideas of touch points, or can you tell me what my touch point should be? And I'm like, sure, as soon as you tell me who your people are. Because the advice I would give to somebody whose referral sources are married people in their 40s and 50s looks very different to somebody who maybe is in their 20s as a real estate agent, and their referral sources are more likely to be single people in their 20s. Totally different. And so if you don't take the time to identify who's referring you now to then craft a plan for them, it's never going to work the way that it should.
Is something that immediate thank you, I think, is really lost in real estate. Now, the problem with real estate is a lot of people get in, and I've interviewed hundreds of agents for a team I was on, and almost everyone says, oh, I just love homes. They're just so pretty. People are good at a couple of things. They don't understand the business side and all that, and they're learning that along the long way. And this is why real estate's hard. But that immediate thank you, what we do is we get the referral, and then when we close it, we call the person 3 months later, that's how long it's been, and say, hey, thanks for that referral. We just closed. And like, what? Who? They kind of forgot. And basic psychology is something good happens, you reward somebody.
Yeah.
And that's why that is so, so important. And on the team that I was on, we did brownies. We used send out cards. Mm-hmm. And the second we got a referral, we were sending out brownies to them. And it was something different than Starbucks, because every agent does Starbucks for whatever. So it's just something to be a little different. So that immediate thank you. And then also, especially if another agent has referred you someone, and there is a lot of inter-agent referrals, is that keeping them up to date, because this is possibly someone who affects their business as well. They mm-hmm. want to know what's going on. They want to know that they're being taken care of. So you can't just take it and forget it. So these are super, super important points that a lot of agents really don't know about.
Yeah. And but when you hear them though, right? Like there's agents listening to this episode and they're like, duh, right? It's so common sense. But in the busyness of running our business, and for a newer agent, like because I used to be an agent, so I had my license active from 2006 to 2010. I'm pretty sure the last house I ever sold was like 2009. I think it was around the time I was pregnant with my second child. And so for me, it's like really, I personally believe real estate is about your ability to be comfortable with really hard negotiations. Like if you've got to figure out how to get comfortable with that and how to go to bat for your client at all times and do that in a respectful way and maintain a relationship with the agent on the other side, in addition to realizing how many things can go wrong during a transaction, disclosures, right? Like all the things that could come back to bite you in the hiney. I mean, any agent who's ever spent any time in small claims court will tell you this stuff isn't that easy, actually, and it can certainly stress you out. So there's the idea of there's that, right? And then there's the actual process of helping someone find a house and take a tight market. And then we're just doubling, tripling the stress on top of knowing how to run your business and knowing how to deliver on a client experience. That's going to be important. Plus delivering on an experience for your referral sources so they keep referring you. It's a lot. And if you don't have processes, procedures, and systems in place, and to know, hey, we use a lot of if-then rules, but then we also use automation when we can as well, or our team to help us. So when I receive a referral, it's almost like I go into robot mode. Right? It's like this happens and this happens and then this happens, right? So I get the referral, it's sent to my assistant, she's tracking it on our tracker, she's sending me back the referral source's address, then she's sending me a task to write the thank you card. So that's getting out the door, the thank you card's getting out the door. And then we move into the closing the loop process of how I'm going to follow up with them, and those things are put on the calendar. Like in some cases, to give the touch, the human element, that human touch you want to give, you've got to have a repeatable process on the back end to actually make it happen. It doesn't mean I need a robot or my computer telling somebody the status. I can do that, but I definitely need something reminding me that it's time to do that. And I think that when you get into real estate, people are like, oh, the freedom. I'm like, yeah, wait till you show houses every night of the week and on the weekends, right? Like, yay. You think Sundays for the Sabbath and a day of rest. Just wait till you got to show houses. And so the idea there is that they get into real estate. And I mean, I say that because that's kind of a little bit what I thought. I had a full-time job and I got my license. I had been married about a year. We didn't have kids yet. And my husband owned a restaurant. And so he was always working nights and weekends. So I was like, and days. So I was like, oh, fine. Like I got time. And so it worked for a long time until I had to show houses with a 6-month-old, or no, when he wasn't 6 months. I think he was like a month or two, strapped to the baby bajorn on my chest. And I was like, I'm out. Like this is no bueno. This is not fun. And so there's all these things that you have to know how to do. But at the end of the day, in addition to being a really good agent who understands how the business works, you also have to make sure you have the ability to bring in clients, particularly in a tight market, because that's the only way you're going to survive. And processes like this are super important for people to have in place.
I get a lot of new agents listening to the podcast. Let's talk about someone who has no past business and they want to. Well, side note for any new agents that are listening to this, the chances of you getting your friends and family in the beginning is very, very small. They knew you weren't doing this yesterday. I've only heard of like one agent of all the agents I've talked to that killed it with friends and family in the beginning. So how do new agents get people to start referring them?
Yeah. It's funny that you said that about new agents. You're not going to get your family and friends. And I instantly in my head was like, who did I sell to in my first year in real estate? I did 8 deals in like just under a year. And thinking back, I'm like, oh yeah, they were all cold leads that came in, because back in 2006, let's be honest, we all know what the market was like, depending on where you live. And I'm in Charlotte and it's a great market, like always. So it was just interesting. I'm thinking about, oh yeah, we could just turn on the lead generator and funnel in all the leads and then call them and close them. So that right. It wasn't until my second year that I started working with friends and family when they realized, oh, she's actually good at this while having a full-time job. They also knew I had a full-time job. So there was all that dynamic, right? So I think the reality when you think about being a new agent is you're right. So we teach, when we think about referrals, we talk about referrals from what we call an ecosystem. And this is one of the things, other than the fact that we teach people to never ask for referrals, the other thing that makes us really different is that we look at referral generation in your business from an ecosystem perspective. And the 4 parts of that ecosystem are, number one, specific people. So of course, if you've been in business and you have people who've referred you, you have existing referral sources. Well, the second piece to the people, the specific people, is the potential referral sources, the people you want to refer you. And so maybe early on, all your family and friends are on that list, but they may not be the right people to go after in the beginning, right? You may have to expand your network a little bit in that regards to have specific people who can be your potential referral sources. So the first part of the ecosystem is specific people. For a new agent, it is identifying potential referral sources. The second piece of the ecosystem is actually your client experience, which of course you don't have until you have clients, but making sure that you have a referable client experience. So it's not only the client experience that you're delivering on, but it's also making sure you recognize those moments when clients are more likely to refer and you know how to leverage those. The third piece, when we kind of think about that ecosystem, is really paying attention to like the networking and the social media and those pieces of the ecosystem. And I think it's one of the bigger things that people miss in terms of where opportunities actually exist. So, we teach a number of our clients, hey, like there's a couple of things you need to know how to say. You need to know how to plant some specific referral seeds when you're out in networking opportunities. Or you need to know how to plant referral seeds in social media, but we're not the social media post, I'm looking for referrals. Don't do that, right? Or the I'm running a contest to see how many referrals I can get in the next 30 days. Help me win the contest. Don't do that, right? These are all the things that I see, right? And so the idea there is paying attention to the things you can do, but you have to be willing to work other avenues. Maybe that does mean you're taking call time at the local office, right? I can imagine that's miserable. I never had to do that, but like maybe that is something that you're doing. Maybe you are looking at other ways to bring in business, because asking someone to put their reputation on the line and refer someone to you when you've actually never done it, right? You're asking a lot from someone. And so you have to look at other avenues. So I usually tell people in their first year, them actually don't worry so much about referrals. And let's focus a little bit more on the other avenues of how you can generate business, while also maybe doing some identification of potential referral sources, taking them through the process we teach to turn them into referral sources. It takes longer, but it definitely works. Or looking at your networking, your marketing, and your social media opportunities. And so we kind of look at that ecosystem of there's other areas. But really, if you're in your first year, it is a lot of pounding the pavement. It is a lot of networking. It is a lot of growing your base of people who know you. It is you understanding the story that you tell to somebody, right, of why you decided to get into real estate and why they should start to trust you, not trust you right then in that second, right? And it's your ability to like stick with it and pound the pavement. And it doesn't matter what business you go into, real estate, consultant, becoming a coach, right? Deciding you want to be a financial advisor, that first year looks the same pretty much for everybody. So from a referral perspective, there's definitely some strategies we teach, but we also say you should also look to build your business in other ways in addition, so that, you can get paid and be able to pay your mortgage and those kind of things, because that's a healthy business. When I work with folks, they're like, I want to be 100% referrals. And I'm like, I don't want you to be. Do I want you to get as many referrals as you want and be the biggest piece of your business development pie? Yes. But you should always have at least 2 or 3 ways that you're going to generate business. That's actually important, right? Variety in that regards, and that diversification is important. It's like someone saying, I'm going to rely on Facebook ads to bring me all the business I need. Sure, until the algorithm changes, right? And yes, relationships are always stronger than algorithms, but the reality there is understanding that you should have multiple ways to grow your business. So when you're new in the business, lean into those ways to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, while the people who will eventually become your referral sources are seeing you dedicated, right? Working hard and learning the business. Because your first 6 weeks as a real estate agent, you will sound different 6 months from then and a year from then. You will be able to talk about things that'll be like, whoa, what happened, right? And that's what it looks like for people. I know people want a shortcut or an easy button or give me a hack, and it doesn't really work that way when you're asking someone to put their reputation on the line. Now, maybe you've got a family member or a friend who just wants to see you survive, right? And so they're like, okay, I'm going to refer you. That's great. We love those humans. The truth is, a couple of years later, they'll have stopped referring you, because in their mind, they'll say, well, you got it now. Like you're
Right.
not kind of on my radar anymore. So it's important to think about those different ways of generating business and to think about referrals from an ecosystem.
You're mentioning, the science and the psychology and all that behind all this. And I think what happens in real estate is we see one person having success with something and we try to do that thing. And then we grab these different pieces, but sometimes it's just a one-off. And I'm saying this because you mentioned the beer koozie, and I have a friend who does the beer koozie, but it works for her because they take it and they take pictures while they're on vacation and they want to show where they're at. But they're also, I don't know the whole psychology of what's happening for those people, but they are getting some love because then she posts the picture of it. She's figured out a system besides just here's a koozie. Think of me here. She's made it about them. And that is, I think, something that's special and unique to her and her ability. But I think an agent can go, oh, look, she's doing this, so I should do this. And I think this is what happens with calendars. Can't tell you how many houses I've listed with other agents' calendars on the refrigerator. So
Yep.
like, oh, I see them doing it. I got to do it. I still have 300 pens that I bought back in 2003, 4 brokerages ago, that I didn't give out because I was like, oh, I could just give this up. So that ecosystem is a good point. Is what is the ecosystem that's going to work for you? And what I always talk about with people is if you're going to do something, do it at a high level. And the person I'm talking about, the beer cozy, she's doing something at a high level. She's not handing it out and that's it.
Right.
So it's finding what works for you and works for your client that you can replicate and will do, and do it over and over and do it at a high level.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes you doing a couple of things, right? To figure out what's ultimately going to work. And I think we're impatient. I mean, I just think human nature is like 24/7. Amazon will have it to me in 24 hours. Like I just make this work today. And it just doesn't work that way. Right. I mean, I know we want it to. I know there's a lot of things in our lives and in society that it looks like it should work that way with everything. But these are people. And people do not fit perfectly into a little Excel spreadsheet box the way we want them to. I mean, they're squishy, right? And sometimes they just don't act the way we'd love for them to, right? In all kinds of ways, right? You just got to raise some teenagers to realize that. And so I think it's important that people pay attention and step back from the easy button and be like, okay, why is that working? That's the number one question you should ask when you see someone doing something. Why do those pop buys work for that one agent? Okay, first thing I've learned is it actually working? Because most of the time there's the perception of it working because they're talking about how they do it. They're talking about what it looks like. I can't tell you how many conversations I get in with people and I'm like, tell me what you're doing to generate clients or generate referrals specifically. And they're like, well, I'm doing this, 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 and this. And I'm like, great. Now show me the data of how many of those people are actually referring you and those things that you're doing are actually getting referrals. And then showing, I don't just care about the number of referrals. I care about how many you're closing. I care about the commission amount being generated on the back end as well. That metric is so valuable. And so when I ask people to show me that, it's all smoke and mirrors, and not because they're bad people, right? They don't actually think about it in that way. Like I just had a call with somebody like a week ago and she was like, oh, I'm doing this thing. I'll leave the name out just because I don't want to do, I don't want to say anything that's not appropriate. But she's like, I'm doing this referral strategy. And I was like, oh gosh, I've heard this before, right? She's like, I'm doing this referral strategy and it's working. Like I'm getting all these introductions. And I really actually hate that word. And she's like, I'm getting all these introductions. And so after we got off the call, I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, she didn't ask for my advice, but I'm going to give it. So I sent her an email and I just followed up. And I basically said, hey, look, here's the thing. I think that's great that you're doing it. And if you think it's working, that's awesome. But the initial feedback you're receiving or the initial activity you think is happening only matters if it translates into an outcome that makes you money. So here's what I want you to track. Do this one strategy, do it for the next 60 days or whatever you want to do. Track not only the number of referrals you receive, but there's a difference between being referred a client who can pay you money versus being referred somebody else who is just going to grow your network, who maybe can refer other people to you. Track those two things, then track how many actually become prospects that you get to have a business conversation or a sales conversation with, and then track the outcome. That will tell me if this strategy you did is actually valuable. Because when we try these new strategies, people give us feedback. They're like, oh, that's so cool. Or, oh, thanks so much for that. Or look at all these introductions I got over email. Who cares if the person that was sent to doesn't actually respond to your email when you follow up? So people pay attention to the front end activity and the front end feedback, which is great. But if it doesn't actually give you results in the back end, it's just a waste of time.
They feel like they're being busy when they're not. I went through a thread yesterday on Facebook where people are like, what's the worst lead generation sources? And people were complaining about Zillow and Opcity and all these other ones. It's because they're hoping that this lead source will do it, and then they're bad leads, and people wanting $3 million home and they don't have a job and whatever. But then when they do these other things, it feels good. Well, I had a conversation because they're just looking for whatever, and they're not. Agents are terrible about tracking.
Yes.
So it feels like something can happen, but with the Opcity and Zillow and all those where they pay for it, well, obviously they don't pay, but for these other ones, they're like, oh, these are terrible, but they don't take that same critique to the other activities, their social media, the referrals, whatever.
One of the most simplest things I think that people can do in their business is just track where their leads come from. Like we give our clients, and actually we have it on our website too. It's you can go to our resource page and grab our tracker, but like the idea there is that we tell people to track referrals, but really you should go bigger than that. You should track every single prospect. And we get the CRM world, like you should have a CRM. It definitely makes data easier. But if you're not actually inputting the information in your CRM, it's like, garbage in, garbage out, doesn't really matter. So we tell folks, put it in your CRM, but I actually think you should double the work and actually put it into an Excel spreadsheet, because you can look at it faster in terms of, wow, I got 7 prospects in January and none in February. And then not only do we want you to track the date and the prospect's name, we want you to track the source of where that prospect came from. Did they come through a Facebook ad? Did they come through Zillow? Did they come from a referral source? And if they did, who's the referral source? Put their name down. And then the 4th column on your spreadsheet should be outcome. Like, did you close them? Are they in process? Did they say yes? All right. Are you putting them in your car and well, no one does that anymore, but right. Like, I used to, that shows my age, I guess, with being an agent, but like, that's the reality is like, and then how much money did you make? And then the 5th column is revenue generated or commission generated. And I think that's the piece that people have to when we see clients start tracking that, it's like another light bulb goes off and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving so many opportunities on the table by not leaning into these strategies that are actually working. And usually that means referrals are working, and that's why they're working with us to get more of them. But like, you can just make such better decisions when you know your data, and data is not sexy, and tracking it really kind of stinks. But the stories that it tells and the advice that it gives you to help you make better decisions are golden.
One of my agent friends, they track where the original source of the client came in or the prospect, and then they try to figure out where they made that decision to take that next step. Because sometimes you get them from Facebook, sometimes you get them from an open house, whatever. But what brought them back into where they're actually an active client now? And sometimes that is completely different. She's really big on TikTok right now. She's doing great on there. And so sometimes it's here and there. And I think that really helps, because the joke is 50% of marketing works. We just don't know which 50%.
I know.
Right?
It's so sad. Like, I have people who are like, oh, I read your book. I'm like, yeah, great. Awesome. How'd you get to my book? Did Amazon make the suggestion? Did it come up in an SEO Google search, or did somebody recommend my book to you? Those are 3 different things. That's 3 different strategies for me, right? That's Amazon, SEO, and referral sources. Like, so you're right. It's the same kind of thing.
Before we tie things up here, what is the big thing you want to leave agents with to think about that we may not have covered yet?
Yeah, so we kind of covered it a little bit, but I would just like to beat a dead horse just a little bit, because it is the single most important thing and powerful and empowering thing you can do in your business. And that is to know without any doubt of exactly who's referring you now. And I mean to the point where you actually have their names sitting on your desk, right? Or maybe it's a screenshot on your phone, but you actually know the names first and last of people who are ultimately referring you. And taking the time to go through that process and identify who your referral sources are, your existing, right? Whether they're active or inactive, right? They referred you in the last year or two, or it's been longer than that. Who are your active and inactive referral sources? What are their names? And you knowing who those people are. That small act of just paying attention to those folks, you'll start to see opportunities to connect with them you've never seen before. Now, I know that's a little bit different than if you don't have a list of those people, but for agents who've been in business for any length of time, knowing who refers you is your low-hanging fruit, because that's the first place I would teach you to go to generate more referrals in a more authentic way that can be consistent for you. But also from that perspective, you're also going to get that momentary like adrenaline rush of like, whoa, all these people, like they believe in me and they think I provide value and they trust me with their reputation and the people they know and care about. And that's actually super valuable and very powerful.
That's awesome. So where can people connect with you and talk a little bit about your trainings?
Yeah, so I know you're supposed to give like one thing that people can remember, but I'm going to break all the rules and say
Do it.
home base is our website. It's stacybrownrandall.com. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes because everybody spells Stacey wrong, but Stacey is spelled with an E. So it's stacybrownrandall.com, and it'll take you to anything and everything you want: resources, podcast, book, and even our programs. They're all along the menu tab that we have. But if you are a book reader or you love to listen to a book on Audible, I would recommend starting with my book, which is Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a podcast listener. So you could then also listen to my podcast, Roadmap to Referrals. So you have that option as well. So I know that's 3 places to go: to her website, check out her book, listen to her podcast. Just pick the one that fits you best. And I think that's a great place to start because we teach things differently. And I sometimes have to unpack all the things that have been beaten into your heads to get you to see referrals the way that we see them. And so absorbing more information is usually the best place to start.
Well, awesome. I appreciate this. I think we may have to do another podcast down the road because I feel like we barely brushed the top of it, but you gave some great stuff. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My record right now is 4 visits back to a podcast. So you can join that club, Mike, if you want to have me back.
Awesome. I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.